in this also, I think it is very important to bear in mind that the initiate system, which was the prevailing system in Egypt at that time, was based upon one tremendous point, a point which we have lost, a point which we have never really attempted to restore, but about which we have given considerable thought and consideration. The purposes of the mysteries, according to such initiates as Plotinus, Proclus, Iamblichus, Ammonius Saccas, and others, was very simple, that the individual should learn factually, truly, beyond question, beyond doubt, through personal experience, that death is an illusion. That immortality is the summit of man's problem. That the ancients not only believed in it, but kept this belief in secret, but developed a science by means of which they could communicate the fact and example and circumstance of death directly to another person. In other words, the initiates of the mysteries, according to the old concepts, were persons who had lived, died, and been born again in this world. In order to accomplish this, there was an elaborate ritual system, because upon the concept of immortality was built the entire problem of an enduring material culture in this world. If immortality was demonstrable, beyond question, not the result of communication, not because certain famous person had believed it, not because we wanted to believe it, or because it was written in sacred books, or anything of that nature, but because the individual who believed it had died, passed through the experience, and come back to life. This was the burden of the mystery system, was to prove conclusively that death was not the end of anything. Thus, in the mystery system, in the Egyptian, which we are interested in the moment particularly, the Book of the Dead, which is a misnomer, part of the same type of misnomer that afflicts us in many other ways. The Book of the Dead, so-called, the Egyptian name for which was not the Book of the Dead, but the Book of the Coming Forth by Day and of the Opening of the Mouth. This was the famous name in ancient times for such great papyri as are in the museum of the British Museum, of the Papyrus of Ani and the Papyrus of Hanufa. These were great examples of the dead coming back to life through the mysteries. Therefore, the ancient philosophy of life was built upon an eternality of life. It was built upon the fact that the individual was for everlastingness, that he would go on. There was no end to it. There was no one converting people to this. There was no one preaching it or teaching it. In the mysteries, the candidate went through it himself as an actual fact. And as Apuleius tells us in the Metamorphosis, the initiate in the temple tread upon the threshold of Persephone, that is the underworld, and beheld the spirits. He went into the realm of death and returned again. Now, we don't realize, perhaps, how important this point would be in the modeling of civilization. We do not realize how oppressive the concept of death is, and how the punishments of the dead in the theological systems, how they may torture or terrify the person. The main point was to establish the reality of survival and its associate belief, the consciousness or concept of rebirth. Rebirth was simply immortality, spaced out. It was a part of the everlasting, ever-livingness of everything that exists. The ancients, therefore, had very little fear of death. And something of the form of a mystical experience of this probably influenced the Christian martyrs in the Circus Maximus in Rome when they died for their faith. There was something about it all that transformed a life of fear into a life of certainty. It also removed the dynamic importance of material existence and represented it in this world as merely the antechamber to eternity itself. And Fudge and also Breasted of Chicago were perfectly aware that the Book of the Dead was a symbolic document, and that the symbolism of the death and resurrection of the soul in that book was based upon the rituals of the mysteries of the soul's journey into the afterlife. And it was a very complicated story in the Egyptian mythology, but it all was condensed into a fraction of its original length in a ritual performed by the Egyptian priests. Breasted told me that he was perfectly aware that it was a ritual when he translated these papyri. And this ritual was the ritual of coming forth by day. Those who die the ordinary death go forth by night, according to the Egyptians, and they wander in a kind of darkness, of uncertainty. They wander through a universe that is benign, wonderful, loving, but like an infant, they have no memory or no conscious thought of where they're going. So those of that type who just simply die as they have lived, asleep as to reality, who have never improved themselves by any conscious effort. These are the little ones. They're not evil. They're not doomed for perdition. Their mistakes will not prevent them from growing. But they are still unable to come forth by day, which means they cannot come forth consciously. They cannot come forth lighted by their own inner light. So they are the ones who must wait, or must go to the Amentet. The Amentet, or Elysian Fields, being the paradise of Egypt. The soul of the Egyptian who died went on into the other world and did what he did here. Virtue rewards with happiness in the afterlife. It may not result in illumination, because the average person who passes on will not be happy with illumination. He will be happy only with the things that are familiar to him. The way of life he has always known is what will make him happy. But after the initiation rites have been performed, the individual comes forth by day. He realizes his place in the plan. He realizes what is next for him. He realizes that going into this larger life is an opportunity to correct all failings of his own thinking. They will come closer and closer to the eternal truths, which are the source of his ultimate union with deity. So by coming forth by day, he comes consciously into the afterlife, fully equipped to face its mysteries, fully equipped to adjust to its circumstances, and already able, at least dimly, to perceive the face of the great God that hides behind the veil. And in Egypt, I think the Egyptians believed that the Great Pyramid was the symbol of the state of consciousness, the state of the internal life of the individual, which in perfect mathematical order and harmony comes forth out of the body in the light and is led by the master of the secret house into the presence of the great gods, where he receives the Kroixan Sata, the symbol of everlasting life. Everlasting life is not the fact that we live forever, for we do that whether we know it or not. But everlasting life is to know it, to realize it, to understand it, not to doubt or to fear.
Later, 19th century metaphysicians were to think of this light as the auric field of the body. They realized that man is continually radiating from his own centers a peculiar kind of highly qualified light. That this light forms a transcendent body, that this light might well be symbolized by the robes of glory of the high priest of Israel, or the mysterious light of the Hierophant of Egypt, who stood upon the porch of the temple clothed in blue and gold, the symbols of light.